Hello and welcome. My name is Nathan Frazee, and I'm the project manager from the Boston Parks and Recreation Department, overseeing improvements to Coppens Square. I first want to welcome you tonight to our briefing on the project. Before we jump into the discussion, we want to flag that the meeting is available in 5 different languages. It may only be 4 right now, but we're working on it. But the languages are Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Vietnamese, and Cape Verdean. And the call-in information will be on the screen. And Megan, translation, the next slide, please. So I'm going to call out the language and each interpreter. If you can Christine, if you can unmute them so that they can read the number in the pin. So Terrence is our Spanish interpreter and can share the call-in information for Spanish.
Soy el intérprete y para quien quiere escuchar toda la conferencia en español, el número es 413-489-4102. Y después de marcar, tiene que marcar un PIN para entrar en esta conferencia que es 846-321-709 y después marcar el símbolo pound al final.
Thanks, Terrence. Raisa is our Portuguese interpreter and can share the call-in information for Portuguese.
Boa noite, gente. Meu nome é Raíssa, sou intérprete de português. O número para a linha, para receber interpretação em português é 1336-94-9401. Aí depois você vai colocar uma senha, aí a senha é 281, 173810, aí aquele símbolo do hashtag.
Thank you, Raisa. Samuel is our Haitian Creole interpreter and can share the call-in information for Haitian Creole.
Hi, everybody. Non problem, c'est Samuel Milus. C'est moi qui interprète pour aujourd'hui pour nous joindre présentation ça dans langue créole haïtien. Ou bon numéro pour composer. Numéro c'est 662 807 1557. Encore une fois, numéro c'est 662 807 1557. Et l'offre nous composer numéro ça. Bon numéro PIN pour entrer. Numéro PIN c'est 921 555 287. 921 555 287. Et l'offre d'entrée PIN on fait pas. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Samuel. Don He is our Vietnamese interpreter and can share the call-in information for Vietnamese.
Xin chào quý vị, đây là Đan Nhi Nguyễn, thông dịch viên cho tiếng Việt bữa nay, và số gọi cho quý vị gọi vào cho cuộc họp để nghe bằng tiếng Việt là 320 204 4857. Số một lần nữa là 320 204 4857. Số PIN để quý vị, mật mã quý vị có thể bấm vào là 459 684 189 459 684 189. Dạ, cảm ơn ạ.
Thank you, Donnie. I believe our Cape Verdean translator is Creole is having some technical difficulties. If we're able to get her connected, we will share the information, but it is on the screen. So if you do need that, please feel free to record it now, and we'll let you know when that is available. So if you are taking advantage of any of these translators, the best approach is to mute the computer and use the call-in, and they will be translating the presentation as we go. So I also want to make sure that everybody is aware that the community meeting is being recorded and will be available on the project website within a week. So please feel free to share with any neighbors who unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight. At this point, I'm going to actually turn it over to Councilor Baker to speak briefly, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Nathan, thank you. I'm more interested in looking at the presentation. Just thank everybody for their work. Ed's on here, Jeff's here. This is exciting that we have gotten, well, Ed and his group have gotten it this far. I think it's exciting for the neighborhood, and look forward to talking about the design and also the money and the time frame. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Councilor Baker. At this point, this briefing will be a little bit different than our typical community meetings, obviously. It will be an online presentation and discussion that's put on from the Parks Department with our park design team and the Friends of Coppens Square. I appreciate you trying this new format of our community meeting with us. We certainly miss seeing everyone's face and our in-person interactions. For this Zoom webinar style, there's 2 ways to interact. You in the community that are viewing the video can see a diagram on your screen now. It shows where at the bottom of the screen, if you click raise hand icon, it will alert one of the design members that you have a question. And during the question and answer portion of the presentation will be called on in the order that those hands are raised. The other approach is clicking the Q&A, which is, you can see also at the bottom. That will pop up a diagram, pop up for you, in that you can enter questions which will be directed to the panelists, and we can continue to answer those as they come in and kind of prioritize how those are coming in. If you are on through the phone, you can join. If you dial *9, that will raise your hand and it will alert Christine. And again, at the portion of the question and answer, she can call on you, and that will unmute your phone, which is done by *6, and that mutes and unmutes yourself once she calls on you. So again, this is a new kind of format, so please bear with us, and we'll get through this and we'll learn as we go. So at this point, we'll click to the next slide. So the agenda tonight is I will do the project team introduction. So then we'll move on to a project overview. We'll go to a goals and objectives from the Parks Department. The design team, Clara Batchelor, will do a presentation, and then we will have a discussion and a poll about the design, and then we'll have some closing remarks and next steps on that. Next slide. So again, my name is Nathan Frazee. I'm the project manager. I've included my email and phone number there. Christine Brandeo is our outreach coordinator in external affairs. Her contact is also there. Ed Cook is the president of the Friends of Coppens Square. So Clara Batchelor is a landscape architect and on our design team from CBA Landscape Architects. With her is Megan Tompkins, also a landscape architect. And I have included Chantal Barbosa, who is the Office of Neighborhood Services. So tonight we'll be talking about specifically Coppens Square, but if there are other things in the neighborhood that you have concerns or want to reach out on, Chantal will be your contact for that. Next slide. So again, this is Coppens Square. It's located between Bowdoin Street and Adams Street in Dorchester, and it has 3 primary entrances, which are all by crosswalk. There also is a bus stop within the square, and so that will be our discussion tonight is within the property with the red dash line around it. So at this point, I will turn it over to Ed Cook from the Friends Group to speak.
Ed, you're muted.
Okay, not anymore. So I was welcoming everyone tonight. You're all friends of Coppens Square tonight. I want to give kudos to the Parks and Rec Department, particularly for this Zoom call, this webinar, I mean, for the translations of the flyer that we sent out to all of the neighborhood organizations and many individuals and elected representatives, and also for the simultaneous translations that were announced earlier. I want to particularly thank Nathan Frazee and Christine Brandau, who have been, they're listed on the team, but they have been doing a tremendous amount of work. Nathan, his second occupation is a French pirate, as you can see. This reminds me, all this work reminds me, in the past we've had multiple meetings organized by the Friends of Coppens Square. And in those meetings, we went to a lot of trouble to get translations for flyers that we distributed around the neighborhood and on emails. So having all this done by the Parks and Rec Department, I'm just so grateful, and I want to give those folks kudos. And I also want to recognize Megan Tompkins and Clara Batchelor from CBA, the landscape architects, who have been doing a tremendous amount of work in preparation for this. We have a couple of purposes for our meeting tonight. The main purpose, obviously, is to update everyone on the final design plan. Final isn't the right word, but the design plan that has been done in cooperation between Parks and Rec and CBA, and came about with the grant of $100,000 from the Community Preservation Act that funded this plan. So we're celebrating that. And as Nathan mentioned, at the end, there will be a poll, and the board of the Friends of Coppens Square, who I will introduce in a minute, is recommending this plan that will be described tonight, and we will ask you to vote. So stay till the end, because we want to take a vote. Let's see, at the original meeting, as you see on this first slide, you see the fountain. Back several years ago, we had the initial meeting literally standing around that fountain. And Frank Baker was there, and the then Commissioner of Parks and Recreation, Chris Cook, was there. And Chris, during the conversation, recommended that it would help with the renovation to have a neighborhood residents organization. And that suggestion turned out to be Friends of Coppens Square. So if you would switch to the timeline, Megan, please. So as you see, back in 2016, standing right after that meeting around the fountain, the Friends of Coppens Square was established. In 2016, the Friends of Coppens Square were incorporated as a 501c3. And in that following winter and into the spring, Friends of Coppens Square had used some money from a grant from the Brown Foundation to hire CBA landscape architects to do several meetings and present initial plans for a redesign and renovation for Coppens Square. And they were working on a pretty small budget, and they did a tremendous amount of work, including the time they spent preparing for those meetings and then attending the meetings. Tonight's meeting follows on those initial meetings in 16 and 17, and is the purpose of this meeting is to complete a requirement for public meetings that the city has rightly to inform residents of projects like ours. And once that once this meeting is concluded, we will, and some paperwork is done afterwards that Nathan has mentioned, but I have no idea what it really is about. Once that process is done, the program will be what's called shovel ready. And that means that we will be able to be considered, be put into the city budget and apply for other funding sources. So in 2019, last year, the Friends of Coppens Square was applied for and was awarded that $100,000 grant. And that brings us up to this meeting in the summer meeting of 2020. And the construction documents that you'll see more about. Then we expect that in the fall, we will have finished the construction documents and cost estimates. There'll be a little bit of talk about cost later on. And then we're hoping that in the spring, the capital fund and other funding sources will provide the money to begin the project in the ground, so to speak. Megan, can you go to the next slide? So our board, when we applied for a 501c3 status, we were required to have a minimum of 3 board members. And so I'm the president, Geoff Doré is the treasurer, Jennifer Johnson is the secretary, and Linda Loska is a board member. And I think I left out Karen Charles Peterson somewhere along the line. Sorry about that. So I have the title of president. This replaces the title that Davida Andelman gave me years ago as high chair. Kind of like high chair better, but for the purposes of the 501c3, I'm the president. All right, let's see. So with that, I will hand off the presentation to Nathan, who will discuss the next part of the agenda.
Thank you, Ed. So the City of Boston's design approach for park design is spearheaded from 4 different approaches. One is City of Boston initiatives, parks and recreation goals, safety guidelines and environmental regulations, and then from this type of community input and engagement. Next slide. So some of the City of Boston initiatives are to address inclusion, shade, access to parks, drinking bottle filling stations, water play, and climate resiliency. And then our park goals are to preserve and protect existing trees, expand usable park area, improve universal access, enhance park visibility, improve access to parks, and to design flexible multifunctional park spaces. So I want you to keep the 2 initiatives and our park goals in mind while Clara's team goes through a park project overview with a recap on the previous community meetings as well as the preferred plan.
May I interrupt for a sec?
Certainly.
I see that Joao has asked a couple of questions on the Q&A page.
Yes.
One is a question about the naming of the project. So there are two names involved here. The entire park is named Coppens Square, named after a Catholic priest from the neighborhood, from St. Peter's Parish, who was killed in Korea as a chaplain. And the other name is Lyman, the fountain, which was dedicated to a mayor of the city of Boston who created a public water system, Theodore Lyman, in the 1830s. The fountain was put up much later than that, but it was in his memory. And Joao mentions that, or alludes to the fact that Mayor Lyman was a very vocal anti-abolitionist. He was a member of the Democratic Party, which at that time was centered very much in the South and was anti-abolition of slavery. We have no intention of continuing the use of that name for the fountain. It is a historic fact, but a question was also asked about how many people actually knew the meeting was happening. So I'd like to address that. And that question, I would say, in answer to that, I would say, I personally sent out flyers in all of the languages mentioned at the beginning of the meeting to every local organization, asking them to send them on to their mailing lists. I sent notices to elected officials, asking them to do the same. I can't record who did what, but I know that Christine Brandau from Parks and Rec also sent out a tremendous amount of a tremendous number of notices. So I just wanted to answer those questions. I'll go back on mute.
Sure. And just to follow up on that, there was a question as well as on the number of attendees. Right now we have 17 attendees with, I believe, 5 are include interpreters and our ONS rep. So with that being said, let's have CBA go into the project. I think Christine may want to hop in.
Yes. Can we just keep our questions, if I know some people have raised their hands, can we just keep that for the end for the Q&A part? So let's just get through the presentation.
Yes.
And if you put anything in the Q&A, we'll try to answer it as we go. So thank you.
Great. So with that being said, I turn it over to Clara and Megan.
Oops, I'm not muted. That's great. This is Clara, and Megan and I are both principals at CBA, and we're delighted to continue working on Coppens Square. We're going to do this presentation together, and I'm going to let Megan kick it off. Our part.
Hey everyone, I'm Clara and I are both principals here at CBA. I'm just going to start by introducing or reintroducing you all to the site and the project. We usually like to sort of give everybody a little visual refresher on what the site is. And as you can see on this first slide, this is a picture of both the fountain and that dedication block. So I agree with what Ed is saying about shifting the focus away from Mayor Lyman, for sure. So one of the things that is sort of key about this, oops, we'll move down. And I'll speak to this a little more when we show some plans, but currently the fountain in this site is not the original fountain. The original fountain was much larger. This fountain, we believe, was replaced the original one in the 1950s and has not been functional since the 1970s. And I'm sure, as you can see from this photo, it's quite small for the fountain surround and for the space it's in. Another key part of this site is the little plaza at the, you know, at the skinny end of the triangle, since this is sort of a triangular site. The little plaza, I think dates to the 1990s. It currently has the bus stop, which we would be keeping. And as you can see, there's shade, which is always great in public parks, but the sort of, you know, the look and the feel of the space is a little tired. It's been, you know, it's been there a long time. And just to sort of get some views of this park from other angles, on the left is sort of from the bus stop area, a view across the lawn towards the fountain, and on the right is another area of another view of the lawn. One thing we've been talking about in this redesign is, you know, perimeter sidewalks and accessibility. Currently, there are sidewalks around most of the site, and we would be connecting those, so it's more of a loop, and you can access the whole thing. Pedestrians can access the whole thing. And I know I mentioned earlier that the fountain at the site right now is undersized. These are images of the original fountain. As you can see, much larger. The postcard in the right has the church in the background, and you can see the granite surround is much more in proportion to that size of the fountain. And there are a lot more shade trees. It was more of a complete space. All right. And yes, and as I keep moving here, this is a very wordy slide, so please forgive me. This is just a quick summary of the 4 meetings that we held in 2016, 2017 in the original design process with the Friends of Coppens Square board. As you can see, the first meeting was just an initial meeting, you know, in which CBA presented sort of a site analysis, probably a bigger version of what I'm presenting now. We always like to show precedent images and sort of discuss with the group preliminary design ideas. The second meeting was a public meeting, and I think it was quite well attended. And at that time, we had sort of a larger discussion about whether a traditional fountain was the right main site feature for this park. We looked at different things like, you know, traditional fountain versus a, you know, modern fountain, whether we wanted sculpture and whether that should be traditional or more modern or abstract. And overwhelmingly, and there was sort of sticker voting, I think, and overwhelmingly the sort of traditional fountain was what was chosen at this meeting. The third meeting in the 2017 process explored locations for that main fountain, you know, the fountain feature, main feature. We just looked at where it is on site is the right place for it. If we should look at somewhere else, either at the, you know, skinny end of the point where the plaza currently is, whether it wanted to shift to another area. And at that time, keeping the fountain in, you know, close to the same area as where it is was also sort of overwhelmingly preferred. Which brings us to the final meeting back in 2017, meeting 4, which it doesn't say public, but I believe it was a public meeting, and I believe it was also well attended. Yes. Thank you, Clara. Yeah, and at that time, CBA presented sort of our, you know, CBA presented the preferred design that we had developed through this process. So it showed the fountain, the surround, sort of a plaza around it, you know, the location, other site elements that we would incorporate, like planting and lighting and things like that. And obviously a schematic cost estimate that has been helping us move forward with this process. All right. And here's our preferred design plan from 2017. As you can see, the fountain is in the middle, very close to where it was originally. We're showing an expanded plaza around it with some seating, some integrated lighting. There would also be some light poles, you know, traditional style around the park. Since there is a bit of a hill in this site, it sort of slopes down one way. We would be making that up with some sort of monumental steps, which could also be really nice for congregating, you know, for general use in the park. We'd also be keeping, just to note, we'd be keeping the bus shelter where it is, and we'd be adding a bunch more shade trees. All right. Clara, do you want to? Oh, Ed, you're muted. Oh, good.
Could you go back one?
Yes.
I just wanted to point out, people were interested in having lighting around the fountain on the floor of the, so I just wanted to show that that's still included in the design. That's it.
Those are submerged lights that would come up through the water and light the fountain.
Exactly.
So, and also we added quite a few trees. If you saw from the historic photograph, this has always been a green, and we've lost some trees over time. So we thought this was a wonderful opportunity to introduce the larger trees drawn here and represent shade trees. The smaller ones, we were thinking of flowering trees, so there'd be color, and but the ground plane would be lawn with these wonderful trees in it.
What kind of trees would the larger ones be? You said the smaller ones would be flowering. So what are you looking to plant for larger trees?
We haven't decided exactly, but they'd be things like, they could be London plane trees or maple trees or tupelo tree, anything that grew to 50, 60 feet tall, that had a large canopy, that offered significant shade. The trees that make a semicircle around the fountain and the plaza, we would have those as a uniform kind, so they looked like they form a circle. They'd be all the same variety, and some of the other trees we could have different varieties to introduce, you know, diversity, plant for diversity in the park.
Thank you.
And so if we go to the next slide, that also helps explain the design. These are called section, and we draw a line through the park, and then if you're standing looking at it cut through that line, this is what you see. So the top section, you'd be standing on Adams Street. Yes, Adams Street and Bowdoin. I think it's great that Bowdoin's on both sides of the park. And you see the Bowdoin Street, and the park would be in the middle. You can see the monumental stairs that would be really fun for sitting on. You see the benches around the fountain. And to the far left on that top, you see a little urn with plants in it, and that would mark one of the sidewalk entrances to the central plaza area. And then the middle slide is slicing it long way from this, Megan referred to it as the skinny end, the point. You see the bus stop that will remain down from where the two Bowdoin Street meet down to Adams Street. This is a section through the park there. You see the trees that make a semicircle around the fountain, benches there, monumental stairs. And then down below is looking, the middle one is looking long ways, and then down below is looking from the skinny end to, and you see the Bowdoin Street on either side to the fountain. So that gives you a feel of what it would be like to be in the park. And then we started to think about, how do we design the fountain? Can we have the next slide, Megan? Oops, before we start that, I want to just show you, this is a survey. Moving into this phase of the design, we were able to obtain a very detailed survey. We've been working with older surveys, but the new survey showed a lot of the subsurface utilities, which are going to be very important. We have to redo the water line into the park in order to have a fountain that actually works. That's one reason the fountain doesn't work now, is the water line was cut. And so this gave us tremendous amount of information that we'll need to produce the construction documents. And so now we can talk about the fountain. And you see the fountain on the left was a picture of the original fountain. And we started talking to a fountain or an ironworks company. And as you can imagine, the number of ironworks companies in this country who can fabricate fountains has decreased greatly over the years. There's not a lot of demand. And we have worked with Robinson Iron Works before. They're out of Alabama, where there were a lot of foundries in the South. There are a lot few. They went from the North to the South, and then now they've left the South, but there's still some foundries in the United States. And they've worked on Boston fountains before. We worked with them on the Coppens Square fountain in the South End. And to recreate this fountain would have cost, exactly as it was, would have cost millions of dollars. But one thing because they'd have to build all the molds, they'd have to create the molds and then cast it. But one thing that Robinson Iron did, as a lot of iron works were going out of business, they purchased the molds from these ironwork companies that were closing down. And so they looked at the fountain and they said, well, we have some of these human figures here, not exactly what were there, but close. We have similar bowls. We have a crane that's similar to the animal on top of the old fountain. We could sort of create a fountain similar, very similar in height and style and figures, and with the current molds we have. And this would be, instead of $1 million plus, this would be a mere $375,000. And we thought, oh, that's great. And then we thought, but it's still an awful lot of money, and it's a very complicated fountain, and it would be relatively expensive to maintain because it has so many different pieces to it. And so we started thinking, could we simplify this fountain, still have it an appropriate scale, and still have it monumental enough to get to occupy a significant amount of space in the center of this wonderful green and to have a presence. And so we simplified it, and using, again, the existing molds. So we weren't having to recreate anything. We still have two bowls. We still have a crane at the top. We still have a pedestal, and we can make the pedestal a little taller if we want it still taller. So we went from a 24-foot tall fountain to a 17.5, almost 18-foot fountain, which we still think will look lovely. And we can make the basin slightly smaller by just shortening because it's hexagonal, or it's segmented, not round. We can make the pieces smaller just to decrease the size of the bowl slightly. And we thought, we bring the cost of this fountain down significantly. So it goes from $375,000 to $179,000, which we thought would be a lot easier to working with the city, working with the Friends of Coppens Square to actually make this park with the fountain a reality. Next.
Could I throw in a comment?
Sure.
For those who have been with our Friends of Coppens Square for years. If you look at the middle fountain, which was proposed by the Robinson Foundry a couple of years ago, and you notice there are figures holding up the bottom bowl. Those figures were, when we really looked at them, are sort of classical European women, which we did not think was, on the one hand, reflective of our neighborhood as it is now, and also they present a temptation for people who might want to be destructive. So we simplified, we removed those in the final design with that purpose. And we still end up with a monumental fountain that is easier to maintain, which is another important feature. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. So we go to the next slide. So here you have the plan that we talked about earlier that Megan presented to you, and a detail of the fountain to sort of summarize the design as it is advanced to date. And we have done a budget for this project because we need to know what this will cost. So the next slide shows you sort of in general categories. We've done a much more detailed budget than this, but you can see breaking it down into sort of large categories: the demolition, the paving and edging, various site features like benches and trash receptacles. The fountain is a large number because in addition to getting the fountain made and put in place, you have to do all the plumbing for it and the lighting and electrical. So we have consultants working with us that are a fountain specialist. We can make sure the fountain recirculates properly and is up to all the codes and it's plumbed correctly. We have an electrical engineer to help us with lighting, the lighting of the fountain, as well as the perimeter lights. More decorative bollard lights around the perimeter of the park you saw. Irrigation, maintenance, etc. So that brought us to a price every time you advance the design, you get to refine the cost estimate because you know more and more details. But we are confident that we are very close to what this fountain what this park, the renovation of this park and the design that we showed you would cost. Megan, can you think of anything else to add to?
Not really, except that we did break down the cost with the larger fountain and the smaller fountain, just to show it there.
Yes, at the bottom line you could see was $1,362,000. So
yeah,
changing the fountain did definitely help, and I think did not sacrifice any of the design.
For sure. Yep.
And next slide. Next slide.
All right.
So Nate, do you want to kick this off?
Well, so at this point, Christine, as we mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, are we doing the poll now or after the discussion? Sorry.
Up to you.
Let's
do you want to do it after or now?
Let's do the discussion now, and then we'll do the voting afterwards. So at this point, we're going to open it up, and we'll actually recap the methods of engagement. So again, the two ways, we've had several questions already come in through the Q&A. So those have been being answered as they've been coming in. So there's two ways. If you're viewing the presentation, if you click the raised hand, it'll raise it'll indicate that you've raised your hand, and we can call on you to ask your question. And you can click on the Q&A, which will open a box on your window, and then you can type your question, which will be sent to the panelists. Again, if you're joining us by phone tonight, *9 is how you raise your hand, and then Christine will call on you and unmute you from there. So with that being said, Christine, do you see any raised hands?
No, yes, I have one so far. I will
Okay.
allow him to talk. Tony B
Okay.
has a question.
Okay.
Tony, you can talk.
I just wanted to know what happened to the original fountain. Did it deteriorate? Did they remove it, put it somewhere else? Does anyone know what happened to the original fountain?
Do you want Clara or do you want me? Oh, okay, me. So we found a record. I forget what the organization we found it in, but what we found was that in the late 1950s, maybe 57 or 58, the top of the fountain was reported to have broken off. That apparently disturbed the whole flow of the fountain, and it was removed, Tony. We did a lot of searching to find out where the original fountain ended up. There are theories that it was melted down for other purposes. I have sort of a comical theory that it's sitting in somebody's yard in Naples, Florida. But there's no record of where it actually ended up. But it stopped being functional in the late 1950s. We know it was replaced by that dinky little fountain that's there now in the early 60s. And as Megan said, at some point in the late 60s or 1970, the city was doing street repairs, and they broke the pipe that fed that small fountain, and it has not functioned ever since. Does that answer your question, Tony?
Yes, thank you, Ed.
You're very welcome.
Great, thank you for that. Now, I saw the next thing that popped up was a question from Emily that asked if the fountain lights would still be operational in the winter when the fountain is not flowing. Clara, do you want to answer that?
It would make sense. We'll have, the fountain will be winterized in the late fall so that the water lines are drained, and to protect it during the winter. And we would certainly then turn the lights off for the winter, because it would be silly to have them on. Or if people say, well, we like the fountain, that's something I would have to talk to the fountain designer with and our electrical engineer. I assume it would be possible to leave them on if that's what people wanted.
Sure.
They're certainly weatherproof. They'll be underwater when the fountain is functioning.
Clara, would they be connected to the city system? So around the perimeter, will they be connected to the city system there? Will they be, maybe you can answer that, Christine, will they be Parks lights, so treated like they are on the baseball field? So
Yes.
it would be on the parks to keep them on or keep them off, correct?
Correct. Yes. So we can set it up so that the pathway lights are a separate line. And so lighting of the pathways in the park are independent of the fountain. So it's, the pathway lighting it does not get turned on if the fountain does in fact get turned off. But like Clara mentioned, we'll talk with the fountain designers and see what their recommendations are around that. So I think the next.
Jennifer has a question.
Yes, I think Jennifer was the next person I saw.
Yes.
And I think
Jennifer, you can speak.
I think she, yeah. There we go.
I didn't have a question per se, but
Your hands was raised, that's why we didn't know.
I don't know how I did that. But anyway, I might as well just ask this, just as a, please remind me, Clara, because it's been a while since we've talked about this project. Is this fountain being designed in such a way that it would be safe for children to use it in the summertime as a water fountain? I mean, not as to splash and play around in, or are we not designing it that way?
Well, there will not be a, Nate, you can stop me, it will be a very low pool. You know, it will follow codes for how much standing water you can have. I can't forget whether it's 9 inches or 12 inches, but it will, and I would say we wouldn't encourage people to play in the fountain. I don't think that's the city's policy, but there's not going to be anything from stopping someone who wants to step into the fountain. Nate, maybe you can answer.
Correct. So if it were to be intended for child's play, it would have to have, we could not have a recirculatory system. So we would have to have water flow from the top and out completely. And that's because of sanitation purposes. So this, similar to our other ornamental fountains, are not intended for play features. Does that answer your question, Jennifer?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. And I believe I saw another hand up that may have gone down, may have been an accidental hand raise. Anybody else? Oh, there we go. Ted. I see Ted has a question. And Christine's going to be calling on
Ted. I would have to make Ted a panelist because it says he has an older version of Zoom, so I'm going to talk. So I'll let that happen for a moment.
Okay.
Ted, you couldn't go.
All right, Ted, you're muted right now. So in the lower left-hand side, there is an unmute. If you click that, it should allow us to hear you. There we go. Great.
And it isn't Ted, it's Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Great. Welcome, Linda. Thank you.
One of the things, I'm heavily involved in the Geneva Cliffs, and we're not doing much up there now because of various reasons. But in the past, we've done a lot of community events. And one of the things that was always missing and very difficult to deal with was having some sort of an access to power for a public address system, even if you just wanted to have a microphone to introduce the mayor, so to speak.
Oh, I think we lost you, Linda. I can't hear anymore.
I think she's asking, will we have that kind of a power system available?
You know, a lot of the light bollards can have a plate on them,
Or the
which has
that like to go, you know, like to have public access. Is that possible?
Linda,
Linda, you cut out for a little bit there. So I heard from a microphone type volume augmenter, and that was the last I heard. Are you able to repeat the next part?
Oh, just have designed such that you would be able to have a power source for a PA system or something like that.
Sure. So we can, what we tend to do when we have electrical access within our parks is to prevent vandalism or improper use of them. Oftentimes they're locked. And so during permitted events, you can request access to that. And that's certainly something we could look into within this project. And again, it may come down to funding, whether that's possible to incorporate.
Okay.
But yes, we can certainly look into that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for that.
Councilor Baker has a question.
There we go. Perfect.
Nathan, has the Parks Department directed any money toward this as of yet? Like made any commitment other than CPA money or like anything coming through the Parks Capital yet?
Not yet. What we're hoping to do within this process is finalize a preferred design and fountain. And then when we have that, Clara's team will work to get the project shovel ready, as Ed had mentioned. That will give us an accurate cost estimate that we can then put that into next year's capital requests. But with that being said, capital funds aren't the only resource we'll be looking at to help fund this project. There's a variety of grants and other money that we will be looking to also contribute to this.
So we're looking at potentially the wintertime, January, February, we'll be able to have that shovel ready. So when we go into our budget season, I mean, even before that, we can talk about it. Do you have any sense of what the city's commitments, like, do you have any sense of what will be available for grant money and other things like that? So what would the ask of the Parks Department or the capital budget team be?
Sure. We aren't exactly sure on that. Again, I think our two primary asks will probably be to the Brown Fund and to CPA. One of the CPA funded the design portion that we're in right now. And for those entities to fund construction, they oftentimes prefer a shovel-ready plan. And so that's why we're trying to get to that phase to then know if we can get any funding through them, how much capital fund we'll actually be looking at here. So
when are the funding rounds for Brown? And you may or may not, I mean, I can find this out tomorrow, but do you know when the funding rounds are for Brown and CPA, when they start, when we'll need to have applications in?
Sure. I believe the Brown Fund opens up their application in the winter, late winter. And so they are still, obviously COVID impacted their awards this year, but they're working on the awards will probably be done in the next month or so for those fundings. And I don't know for CPA, I'm sorry, but I can find out.
And who will be preparing those grants? Will that be your team, Nathan, or will that be Ed's team for Brown and for CPA?
Typically, those come from the Friends group. The Parks Department does provide, as the property owner, we provide letters of recommendation and support. And so I can tell you both former Commissioner Cook, Chief Cook now, and Commissioner Woods have been supportive of this project. So I do not view that as any issues going forward.
And also private money, like, and we're able to raise private funds also.
For sure.
Through Ed's 501c.
Correct. And so
Okay.
one thing I have encouraged the Friends group to ensure this project is as successful as possible for generations to come, and we do not repeat history with a broken fountain that, you know, as Ed mentioned, disappears, or a line that gets busted and never gets repaired. We're asking the Friends group to contribute and work to support an endowment that can go towards future years' maintenance of the fountain so that we can make sure it continues to operate.
Well, 50s and 70s, we're a city in decline. So, and I
For
would
sure.
say my vote is that fountain has definitely been melted down someplace. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Councilor Baker.
So I'd like to, do we have any more questions?
Well, Ed, one thing what I would like, if you can speak to some of the questions that we were getting throughout the presentation, just about the board.
Yeah. So there was a question about the diversity of the board. The diversity of the board, Karen Charles Peterson is on the board. She's an African-American woman, and her house is abuts the park. The other members are Caucasian. That's not reflective of the entire neighborhood. However, that distribution of ethnicities is not reflective of the Friends of Coppens Square. Friends of Coppens Square, as anyone can attest who was at any of our multiple public meetings, can tell you, those meetings had people from all over the community and were very reflective of the community. In order for us to get a 501c3, we needed some officers. We needed to put those together kind of quickly. Those are the people that were available and willing. But I just want to emphasize the diversity of Friends of Coppens Square is not reflected in the board. Is that enough for?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Ed. One thing I will add on to that, if anybody is in attendance that's interested in getting involved with the Friends of Coppens Square, please share your contact with me, and I will make sure that gets to Ed and the Friends, and you can facilitate that involvement. So with that being said, what we would like to do is open this up to a poll to vote. And I think, Megan, if you don't mind going back to the screen with, I think, one more back. One more. One more. There we go. Perfect.
No, you went
Yeah,
too
this,
far.
oh, wasn't, there we go. The one with the plan and the fountain. So at this point, Christine is going to activate the poll. So that is a yes or no. And the question is, which will be shown on your screen, do you support the proposed plan and fountain as recommended by the Board of Friends of Coppens Square? Yes is a support for the plan that's currently being shown on the screen with the fountain that's in the lower right-hand corner. So we'll open that up for a minute to allow people to tally their vote.
There's another question in the chat. It says from someone named Host, how do we make it reflect the community? It is a big and important project that we need to be a part of the decision-making process.
Sure. So again, if we go back to the beginning of the presentation and some of the larger initiatives and goals from the Parks Department, one of those is certainly to address inclusion and access to parks. So one of those avenues is coming to the community and to seek input throughout this process. So if there are any input, this is now certainly the time to put that forward. If for whatever reason in a community meeting setting, you are uncomfortable speaking or in this case typing, you certainly can send any comments to my personal, to my work email, which will be shown at the end of the presentation, work email and phone number. So do not hesitate to reach out through that platform as well.
All right, I'm going to end the poll now.
Are we able to?
Yep. So
Does it give us quantities here?
It says 11 yes, 0 no's, so all 100%. So very
Okay.
intended.
All right, so that will be logged into the meeting notes as well. And again, this will be put up on a project website. The recording will be as well. And again, if there's any input that you did not feel comfortable putting out tonight, feel free to email me. So if you skip back just to the next step, back one page. So again, as we mentioned, Clara Bachelor Landscape Architects are going to continue to finalize the shovel-ready documents and bidding documents. We're going to continue, the Friends Group is going to continue to campaign for a maintenance trust to help raise money for the ongoing maintenance when this project is built. what we will be doing is continuing to seek construction money to help fund the project and getting that into the capital fund request as well. And the construction will be contingent on obtaining that money. So,
could I just make a comment, Nathan, about the maintenance? It has been suggested, as Nathan said, that Friends of Coppens Square create an endowment for the continued maintenance. And we've been consulting with the Friends of the Boston Common. They have the Common, the Public Gardens, and Commonwealth Mall under their purview. They have a lot of experience, and they've been very friendly and open to giving us suggestions. Jeff Doré and I have been talking to them. They've recommended someone who does a lot of maintenance for fountains. It's more complicated than I had envisioned. And I think it's going to be a really heavy lift for us to raise the amount of money that we will need to have in the endowment so that every year it can pay out sufficiently to maintain the fountain, basically. The Parks Department will maintain the lawns and trees and so forth, but the fountain will need maintenance, and that's going to be a really heavy lift. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Ed.
I have another question, sorry,
Sure.
which I'm going to allow Chantel to answer. I unmuted you, Chantel, I'm going to read it out. It says, can we have a welcome to vote in Geneva sign near the square? Chantel, would you be able to try to see if we can get something like that?
Can you say the question again?
Can we have a welcome to vote in Geneva sign near the square?
Oh, yeah.
Chantel?
Yes, I think that would not be a big addition to the budget, I think. Clara, what do you think, or Megan?
That would be a little drop in the bucket on this budget. It would be totally
Yes.
doable. Yes.
And let's
And I think that's
also,
something we would have to work out with
yes.
Chantel, and she can figure out how to get
Yeah.
that.
Let's let Chantel speak here as well.
Hi, everybody. Yes, I'll definitely have to follow up. I don't know who wrote the comment, but I can share my email. Okay, I can share my email in the comments so I can connect with the constituent and find out how we can go about
We have your email on the next slide towards the end. So
Yes, Megan, if you don't mind advancing to the next slide. So again, thank you everybody for signing on here. As I mentioned, if there was anything you didn't feel comfortable with, here is my contact, both my email and phone number. So feel free to reach out to me. Christine has her contact here. So if you have interest in getting involved with the Friends group, Christine is the point of contact that can help facilitate that and that connection. And especially for that last question, Chantel is our ONS, Office of Neighborhood Services rep. And so her email and phone number on here as well. One thing I will point out though, is if you have any other concerns in your neighborhood that are not directly pertaining to this, please feel free to utilize the Boston 311. That you can use that through an app, through tweeting, as well as calling in. Anything you put into that gets put into a queue that can be followed and responded directly to you. So that's a great avenue to kind of track any items that need repair or issues in your neighborhood. All right, with that being said, I think unless there's any other questions or hand raising, which I do not see, I think we'll conclude. But again, look out for the email to go onto a project's webpage. That will be the best avenue to find that website is to Google Coppens, improvements to Coppens Square, in that your Google Analytics should have that pop up as one of the first links. I will tell you that my ability to create project websites is currently down for some reason. So we will be having that live within the next few days though. And within the next week, the meeting minutes from tonight, the presentation, and the video will all be on that project website. All right, if there's any last questions or anything, we'll conclude the meeting.
Great job, you guys. Great job.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.